What we're talking about today is DRM 101, which is sort of, in a sense, ripped from the headlines. Yesterday's Consumer Electronics Daily said, labels coming to terms with DRM-free music. Concord executive says, whoever their Concord Music Group. There's a lot of noise out there, and some might ask, is DRM alive or is it dead? And what is it? Hopefully we'll examine some of those things today. We have a very distinguished group of panelists. Fortunately, we have a couple people who couldn't make it. We have some very high-quality stand-ins for them. We're lucky to have them. I'm going to introduce each one before they speak, rather than introduce the whole panel, and you'll forget how bright all these people are. Our first speaker is somebody that I have sat across the table from a lot and negotiated with, and who I have tremendous respect for, John Baumgarten, who's a partner in the Proskauer Rose law firm, and he's in DC. And I'll just quickly quote from his bio, which I normally don't, because mine and Martindale's all puffed up, but it says, John is widely recognized as one of the country's leading domestic and international IP lawyers, with particular emphasis in copyright matters. And he is. And I've had the pleasure of working with him, learning with him, arguing with him. He may be a great lawyer, but sometimes we disagree on some of the principles of copyright. But he did have the smarts to go to the right law school. He, like I, went to NYU Law School down, not too far from here. But before he was at Proskauer, John was general counsel of the Copyright Office during a really critical time in 1976 to 79, where there's a whole overhauling of all the Copyright Office's rules and practices under a new copyright law. John.
Today was going to be a momentous, is this on?
Yeah, if you ever can't hear one of our speakers, please in the back.
It was going to be a momentous day because after being criticized by Jim for years about never using PowerPoints, I was going to use a PowerPoint. But stuff happens and the PowerPoints didn't get done. So I'm going to ask you to use your imagination today. Work with me on the virtual PowerPoint. The first slide was going to highlight the title of the first segment, essentially two segments of my remarks. I was going to say, in beautiful bold letters, DRM today, is it even worth our time talking about? Those would be followed by my name and my firm name and my phone number and my email address and my billing rate. So that's it. And the immediate next slide was going to be full screenshot of a 1958 Edsel automobile with a very prominent focus on its famous oval or horseshoe grill. Now, I'm going to assume that some people in this room are old enough to remember the Edsel and the Edsel debacle and how it came to represent failure, commercial failure to take into account consumer desires and expectations. Both the Edsel name and the famous grill. For those of you who don't remember the Edsel grill or never knew about it, it was described as termed as an Oldsmobile sucking a lemon or a Pontiac pushing a toilet seat. It was sort of called for horsepower shape. Then I would pick up that slide. And my next slide, it would list the areas where, according to published reports at least, DRM appears to have been Edselized today. First, music, physical downloads, and second, and more recently, was the audio physical downloads. At least in the perspective of some major publishers in the house, most notably, England has been quoted as leaning in the same direction. Simon & Schuster was quoted as experimenting, I guess we should walk across the street and HarperCollins is not exactly sure whether to do the thinking about it, but there seems to be fairly prominent reports of the depth of the in audio book download. Software, I'm not sure. I've heard different stories of high-end companies, not lower-end business software companies. But then my next slide was going to be a full-color, full-screen shot of the 2008 Bugatti Veyron. I saw on the web the other day. Very sleek vehicle. It's been likened in appearance to a stealth bomber, and on its front is a grill unmistakably reminiscent of the Edsel horse car. The price tag on that car with that grill is $1.9 million. Now, I'll ask you to assume with me for a moment that price has some relationship to value and consumer demand. So that the next slide would have been those areas where DRM appears to be not only not dead, but quite vibrant and perhaps increasing in importance. Still in the music industry, perhaps not digital downloads, but certainly subscription services. Otherwise, there would be no basis for maintaining subscription non-subscriber division. Literary works, well, perhaps it is or has disappeared in audio books, but in e-books, I think the jury is very much still out. Kindle e-books are still being DRM. And another interesting thing, even about audio books, is that although Random House has said, the authors community, perhaps the agency community, still has to be heard from at least one or two important agents looking forward to saying the thing that they learned about DRM from the music industry is not to leave DRM off, but to put it on and avoid the problems that the audio industry faced, the music audio industry faced, because literary audio is just developing in this area, and perhaps they should start with DRM. At least, as I said earlier, in some iterations, high-end software packages will continue to be DRM. Video games apparently are not leaving DRM anytime soon. And that leads directly to the area that many on this panel, I, Jim, are most closely familiar with, and that is motion pictures. I think here is quite clear that DRM is very much alive. So it's finding perhaps increasing in importance. For this purpose, at least, I'm not going to get into an analytic discussion about whether content protection technologies like CSS, AACS, or DRM, or not DRM, akin to DRM. I'm going to include them as DRM, and in my judgment, but the course, which is much more important to my judgment, you can ask my friend to my left, DRM is not going away from DVD. But even more important, with the likely emergence sooner or later in AAS encrypted DVDs, and perhaps even someday in CSS encrypted DVDs, of something called managed copy. Likely the case that managed copy facility, including pre-ripped copies embedded in the disk, will be DRM protected. Fox is on the market with something called digital copy, which is a pre-ripped, pre-DRM copy living on a DVD disk so that consumers can move it to portable devices. And that is a DRM manifestation of the content. So I think it's rather clear that DRM is very much alive. Perhaps increasing the importance of what we're talking about. Before leaving that subject, there's two related developments that should be mentioned. First, to the extent that the DRM problem resided not so much in the desire to copy freely, but the desire to move freely on its content, and to the extent it resided in the desire to break up certain prominent retailer controls of the marketplace by making things more movable. Notice how careful.
Very good, Jim.
An interesting development is a possible re-emergence of interoperability as a solution. It's a hot solution for a while, then it disappeared. But as Paul Sweeting has pointed out in Content Agenda, the European Commission, which was very vigorous critic of DRM protection, now apparently begin to take a greater interest in the Coral framework solution DRM interoperability. It's one of the area where Jim and I sat, pretty much on the same day. So interoperability is an alternative to the abandonment of DRM. It grows attraction in Europe, deserves watching. Additionally, increasing talk about watermarks and fingerprints. Most of the watermark and fingerprints that people talk today are lawyers tend to go forensic design watermarks and fingerprints. They're designed to trace and lay claim rather than copy control watermarks, which are designed to convey information and have devices respond. But whether watermarks and fingerprints will retain their purely forensic purpose or will be evolving into something very close and akin to DRM, I think is also another question. So again, I think it's a good thing that we're here today and not a waste of our time to work on. The second part of my remarks, quite briefly, is, and I'm going to be somewhat ungracious to our hosts, and so I'll apologize in advance to Jim and to Victor, because I'm going to criticize the title, the subtitle at least, of our program today. The title or subtitle is Content versus Technology Collision. And my point here is that the verbal imagery of contention, if not outright war, between the content and the technology communities, although very easily supportable in the popular press and in the trade press and on the web and in the blogs and even in legal literature, it's in many ways rather overblown. Below the surface, there is in fact a great deal of discussion, of understanding, of cooperation, full presence of antitrust counsel, among the representatives of technology companies, hardware manufacturing companies, and content companies, particularly on the motion picture side. And a lot of the tables that Jim and I and Brian sit around are designed just towards that end. I don't want to mask that there are differences. If there weren't, life wouldn't be quite as interesting or remunerative.
For either of us.
But there is a great deal of, I think, mutual understanding and respect. And I want to draw on, I was going to say an analogy, but it's more of a comparison to something that occurred in an earlier technological revolution, particularly because we're in New York, where most of this happened, and where I grew up with. And that is that the digital revolution was not the first technology revolution in copyright. In the late 60s, early 70s, mid 70s, there was another. And although looking at its audience, it might be hard for most of you to either believe or to credit is true. There was one that scared the hell out of the copyright community in New York City, and that was photocopying. It was terrifying to the publishers. And again, I understand the legal things. How could photocopying be equated, except perhaps with digital photocopies, to the digital revolution? And we can debate the differences in the technology, what effect they had on the fact that copyright owners have traditionally been protected basically by what Albie Sony calls friction, what I call heating. It's hard. The threat of the technology was there, and particularly scientific, technical, and medical journal publishers and textbook publishers were terrified of photocopying. And the relevance is that in those days, when I was very much involved with those industries, we attempted to talk to the manufacturer. There was a company whose name I won't mention, but if you look down towards the bottom of the alphabet, you might find the first letter of the list. And I was pretty close to literally, physically thrown out of their offices in trying to discuss with them ways that photocopying manufacturers and journal and book copyright owners might sit down and work together to find ways that the collision would be averted. Instead, we went with I even sued our alma mater, so that's NYU for voting. And they were selling up there, but the litigation was there because we just couldn't. Something very different that's happening in this area, and one can speculate as to why, but whether within the forums of CSS, the forum responsible for conventional DVD encryption, or AACS, the forum responsible for encryption on high-density DVDs, or something called the Copy Protection Working Group, which meets periodically in Los Angeles, or the Coral Consortium, three of us here, there is a lot of talk, and as I said, a lot of understanding, and a lot of attempting to release solutions going on. This is one of the few things in life I can prove success, and that is DVD is the result. I firmly believe that Hollywood would not have gone digital without CSS, or without the DMCA for that matter. So I think with that success story in mind, thank you for your time. I hope I convince you that the time here today was worthwhile.
Thanks, John. You know, it's true, Revolution, to quote Justice Breyer, I bet the monks were really pissed at Gutenberg. They had this great job illustrating manuals and illustrating Bibles. Gone.
I'm not that old.
No, I know you're not that old. You only graduated a little bit before me. Just a quick question for the audience. How many of you are lawyers out there? Raise your hands. Don't be shy. Fair number. How many of you would consider yourselves technologists involved in technology? See a few familiar faces from technology. How many of you are in the business folks? Sales, marketing. Great, nice, evenly split. Our next speaker is Brian Fox, who is Counsel Legal Affairs for New Media and Technology in the Legal Affairs Department at Sony Pictures Entertainment. Brian works exclusively in the New Media and Technology Group in the Office of Chief Technology Officer and participates in the development of digital strategies and policies all across Sony's businesses. He participates, as John said, in a lot of the same organizations. I'd say John's right, there's cooperation, but it was hard to get there. Brian is one of those people who's a real pleasure to work with. Not that your other clients aren't, John, but I've really enjoyed working with Brian on some of these things. It has been difficult to get to where we are, but I think John's right, there is some success in all this. Before joining Sony, Brian was a member of the corporate department of Latham & Watkins in LA. We were in LA, right? Focusing on intellectual property transactions, and received his law degree from the University of Texas and his bachelor's from Duke. Brian?
I am the sole representative of the content industry here on the panel, and I think based on kind of what we discussed before, there's going to be a lot of discussion about DRM, in particular how DRM relates to anti-piracy efforts and copy protection efforts. And I don't want to minimize that. DRM is a real crucial part, in fact, it's widely deployed and fairly well developed in a lot of anti-piracy efforts. But it's really only one tool in our anti-piracy efforts. And there are a lot of other opportunities that DRM provides, and a lot of other benefits that the film industry and the television industry, for which DRM is alive and well, feel that we get from the use of DRM. And so, kind of building on what John introduced, and conflicts and collision course between technology and content. As technology develops, it provides opportunities. It also provides challenges, and there are definitely challenges as things increasingly go digital and digitally delivered in terms of the content level. But the film industry and the television and movie industry in general have a number of key differences in terms of the products that we offer that make DRM important to us regardless of copy protection. Unlike the music industry, we actually offer a number of different products, and actually, as John alluded, in the music industry, even, where they're looking at different types of services and different types of products, they're still looking at using DRM. But for years, we've we've offered products like video on demand. We've offered products for subscription services. We've offered sell-through in the form of VHS and DVD. But those products are different. The value to consumers is different. The needs of consumers, we feel like those products respond to different needs of consumers and desires of consumers, and so we've been providing those for on-demand subscription services. Cable companies, satellite companies, kind of conditional access networks have been providing those types of services for years, and those types of content delivered that way has never been has always kind of been in a roach motel, so to speak. It's confined to those services. As we move to internet delivery and online delivery, we absolutely want to be able to provide those same services. And in fact, because of the flexibility of online delivery, we want to be able to offer even a more robust product to consumers. Why on earth would we feel like limiting ourselves to pay-per-view on an internet basis, where someone has to sit down at their computer at 7 p.m. and watch a streaming video? No one wants to do that. The internet provides a lot more flexibility. And DRM actually allows us to provide that, because DRM allows us to specify the usage model and the rules that are associated with that content. So if a consumer wants to pay a much reduced price for a product that will, I've already lost one.
And we're counting too.
Pay a reduced price for a product that expires in 24 hours. We should be able to provide that at that reduced price, because that's all the consumer wants, to watch it once and have it go away. DRM allows us to do that. It allows us to set the parameters of the use of that content so that it goes away. Subscription models are the same way. It allows us to differentiate between subscribers and non-subscribers. And so it's very easy to look at kind of the different products that can be provided, and DRM allows us to differentiate between those products. If every product was just streamed to you and it's yours forever and you could do it, VOD wouldn't be available. And for consumers, that's a lot of times all they want. So it allows us to set the length of time, the number of devices, where you can watch it, when you start, end, and those sorts of things. Can you start and stop watching the content, pick up in the same place? Those kinds of things are, DRM allows us to do. The difficulty, and this is something that both technology companies and content companies are dealing with, is whenever consumers bump up against a limit, whenever a legitimate consumer bumps up against a limit that limits something that they want to do with their content, that they feel they have a legitimate right to do with content, then kind of everybody loses. The consumer loses because the consumer's frustrated. Content companies lose because they feel like it devalues our content. It actually provides incentives when that happens for would-be legitimate consumers to try and find a way to get less legitimate copies of content. And so one of the kind of downsides, and DRM is really the whipping boy for kind of a lack of interoperability. And this is something that everyone realizes, and that I think everyone in all of these industries is working on. When I'm going to, as John did, include kind of CSS and AACS and various other copy protection technologies, in kind of the DRM realm, but 99% of consumers have no idea that CSS exists on DVDs because they're just doing what they'd expect to be able to do with a DVD. They're, putting it in a DVD player, pressing play, and off it goes. That is not always the case with digital content. And one of the things that can prevent that is DRM, locking it into a particular device. Now with digital content and with online delivered content and where you have it on a device, it's actually not only DRM that's the issue. I mean, you've got file format issues, but file format doesn't currently get kicked around in the press a whole lot. DRM does as blocking interoperability. And a lot of the things that are going on right now in the industry, as John also alluded to, are a lot of companies coming together to try and deal with the interoperability problem. And things that you see happening within DRMs themselves is a migration from, say, copy count and binding a particular piece of content to a particular device to more of a domain model where you can move content among a particular domain of devices or have multiple copies of content within your domain. But even beyond that are kind of interoperability solutions where you can have multiple DRMs, because a domain-based DRM certainly takes you a step in terms of allowing kind of consumers to approximate their household in terms of what devices they have in their household. But it is limited by the number of DRMs that a particular device will actually cooperate with. Apple's FairPlay only works on Apple devices. And there are other proprietary DRMs as well, and so if you wanted to take that content into a non-Apple device, you couldn't do it. So there are some other initiatives that are evolving, both Coral and I'm actually involved in another initiative that we had a kickoff meeting for back in September. That had 27 companies involving major studios, music labels, technology companies, consumer electronics companies. That group has now grown to about 40. And it kind of offers service interoperability, which actually would allow a consumer to have multiple DRMs and register devices with a service that would then allow them to kind of manage their content between DRMs. But again allows the content owners to be able to continue to specify these different models, and these different uses for content depending on what the consumer tried to pay. So I'm getting the nod. That's it for me.
I mean, I hope we'll have time for questions at the very end. I'm trying. Thank you, Brian. I hate being kind of the bad guy. Our next speaker is Dr. Jeffrey A. Bloom, who is the U.S. Content Security Research Manager for Thomson's Technology Strategic Business Unit. Jeff oversees content security at Thomson's Burbank Laboratory and coordinates similar efforts for watermarking and fingerprinting technologies across the company's facilities in Europe and North America. I bet you he has a lot of frequent flyer miles. Before Thomson, Jeff was at Sarnoff, where he was the technology leader from 2000 to 2005. He founded Sarnoff's Information Security and Embedded Communications Lab. He began his career in 1998 as a research engineer at NEC Research Institute, where, guess what, he worked on watermarking technologies. Jeff holds a PhD from UC Davis and an MS in Electrical and Computer Engineering and a BS from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Jeff.
So I'm going to talk from up here and use the computer since I'm the first technology speaker. I guess I took the name of the panel a little more literally, DRM 101, as a primer. And what I'm going to talk about watermarking and fingerprinting and how it fits into digital rights management. But I'm going to step back and talk about some definitions from a technical perspective. So for most people in this room, just I think bear with me because there may be some subtle differences in how the definitions are presented that make a difference kind of at the end. So traditional DRM tools, there's essentially three parts, right? Usage rules that represent a business agreement. They're not arbitrary rules. There's a business agreement on top, and the rules are used to express that business agreement. And there are rights expression languages. Every DRM uses some sort of rights expression language. And this is a way of expressing those rules in a way that a machine can understand. And then you have compliant devices, and these are the things responsible for enforcing those rules. They may permit some actions or prohibit some actions or limit some actions either in time or geography or date. They may provide some tracking. Essentially what they do is they enforce the usage rules. And then typically the content is encrypted and you have some key management infrastructure that you need. And what this is for is to limit the access to just those compliant devices. So this is when we talk about DRM, very often this is what we're talking about, this traditional DRM. But as was mentioned by some previous speakers, the definition of DRM is getting broader and has been, and different people have different definitions. And of course, it always includes traditional DRM, and that is controlling access to the content, managing the usage, and enforcing the business rules. And here's just some examples of some. The last one, Coral, isn't a DRM, it's an interoperability to interoperate different DRMs, and I think we'll hear more about that. And conditional access systems, and this is access control, and there's a bunch of well-known products and companies. And so, T, spelt it wrong. Apologize, I spelled Erdetto wrong. And these are, and then the third part is copy protection. So copy protection typically can have two different aspects. Record control, tools that prevent unauthorized copying, and playback control. And the idea here is that even though you're trying to prevent unauthorized copying, sometimes it occurs, and consumer devices hopefully could recognize that this is an unauthorized copy and not play it. And if that happens, then the value of that unauthorized copy goes way down. And just some examples of technologies on optical discs, CSS, AACS, and some anti-ripping technologies. DTCP and HDCP, CGMSA are like link encryption, devices talking to each other, so connectivity issues. There's analog protection. ACP is Macrovision's analog copy protection. Veil is a technology put into the picture, and similarly Variance is put into audio, and audio that's a watermark, audio copy control watermark. And these are all tools for copy protection. And certainly I mentioned watermarking, and Veil can be considered watermarking. Watermarking has been proposed and can be used in here too as a DRM tool for copy protection. So now I put on the title here rights management because the RM of DRM is rights management, and I want to talk a little bit more about the management part. The tools that we described, the DRM tools, copy prevention tools, copy protection tools, these are locks. These are technology locks that are intended to prevent misuse of the content. So the title's also loss prevention, because most of the emphasis on DRM often is on preventing loss. But management, the larger problem of managing rights, requires tools to measure and characterize and understand the loss, understand how and when and where the loss occurs. If you think of it as an analogy to risk management, you don't expect the risk to go away, but you expect to have tools that help you understand the risk better so that you can actually manage it. So two technologies that have emerged to help with this kind of measurement are watermarking and fingerprinting, and these are tools for content identification and tracking. So just one slide on what digital watermarking is. Essentially, you're attaching metadata directly to the digital media. The actual content values, the samples of the audio or the colors of the pixels of the picture are actually changed. But they're changed in such a way that it's imperceptible, that you can't hear that something's been changed and you can't see that something's been changed. And while not all watermarking is robust, the ones that are relevant here are robust in the sense that the embedded information can be recovered even after the formats has been changed. So we're not talking about putting stuff in the VBI where it can be stripped, or putting stuff in a header where you lose it if you decompress something. We're talking about actually in the pictures or audio, something that might survive compression or signal processing or digital to analog to digital conversion. Some watermarks are even designed so that if a movie is projected and then captured on a camcorder and then resized and then compressed, that you can still recover the data. Or if it's broadcast on a loudspeaker and captured with a microphone, you can still recover the data. And finally, the payload. What is this attached to metadata? Well, it's what it could be. It could be anything. It could be something like a device serial number, the device that played or decoded the content. It could be the state of that device, the memory locations, the firmware version. It could be a content ID identifying the actual content. Could be a timestamp. Could be identification of the customer or the recipient, or the session ID, or it could identify the distribution path where the content went through, and that's a valuable management tool. Fingerprinting is different. Fingerprinting, what you do is identify unique characteristics of a work and associate these with metadata, and this enables future recognition of a copy of that work. So there's a couple of steps. First, you register content, and when you register it, you just extract those characteristics and store them in a database, and then later, when you see some content, you can extract characteristics and look in your database and see if you've seen it before. The goal is to be robust. If two copies of something are recognizable by a human as those are the same thing, then hopefully the fingerprints should match. So let me skip this one and go right to my summary because I'm a little short. So the summary, DRM, conditional access, copy protection. These are technical enforcement of business agreements, and the goal usually is prevention of loss. And watermarking, fingerprinting can go in there as copy protection tools. But watermarking, fingerprinting can also do other things. They provide ubiquitous measurement and tracking. Ubiquitous meaning that it's robust and survives all kinds of translations. This allows for things like audience monitoring, where you can recognize what content an audience member is viewing or listening to. Content flow, you can map and measure the flow of content through networks, and tracking usage within a household or within a community. And these ideas are very powerful, as Brian was mentioning, that they open up new potential business models where it's not a matter of preventing people from copying, as important as that is, but it opens up new business models that might be based on usage or content flow. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to give you a little perspective, some of the IT industry, at least a lot of the people I represent on watermarking, is forensic watermarking, which I think was the last part what Jeff was saying, is something that we have no issues with. It's when you ask for watermarks like Veil, particularly, to be either copy or playback control. I don't have time, I'm not going to take the speaker's time, but there's a lot of issues with that people want to know. They can ask questions later. Speaking of IT, I have to be nice to the next speaker. No, he's a client, so just in full disclosure. Tom Kulkert joined HP, Hewlett-Packard as we all finally know it, in June of 2004 from Philips Research Laboratories in Eindhoven, which I've spent a couple of nice days in Eindhoven. That's in the Netherlands, for those who don't know. Where he worked on security of multimedia content, spent a lot of time on watermarking and fingerprinting also for video and audio. Earlier, he worked at Philips Research in the field of computer-aided design, specializing in semi-automatic tools for system verification, whatever that is, and you're not going to explain it. Tom's also served as a part-time professor in the signal processing group at the Technical University in Eindhoven. And Tom received both his Master's of Science and PhD degrees in mathematics from the University of Leiden in the Netherlands also. Tom is a fellow of the IEEE, which reminds me I asked you about that, for his contributions to practical applications of watermarking, particularly watermarking for DVD video copy protection. Tom is the co-founder of the recent IEEE Transactions on Information Security and Forensics and chair of the Associated Technical Committee. Tom. Get your prezo up.
Thanks for the kind introduction, Jim. Let's see. Okay. I'd like to start with a remark that Brian made. He said, for regular consumers, that if you take a DVD and you put it in a DVD player, it will work. Actually, I disagree. I travel a lot to Europe. I buy a DVD, say Schiphol Airport, Schiphol, Amsterdam, the Netherlands. I put it in my DVD player at home, which happens to be in California, and it doesn't play. Why? Because there is region coding. And I think there's actually a significant portion of consumers that actually face that problem. It's not just 0.001%. It's a lot more. So anyway, we have a discussion. Anyway, in this talk, little talk, I'd like to talk a little bit about the disconnect between consumers, expectations of consumers, and expectations of content owners and service providers. So I'll start with a very short story. It's a personal story. Actually, this happened to me. And so in this case, there is a consumer, which is me, and it was a service provider, which I won't mention, no names here. And I bought a device. Oops, this is what happens when you actually copy a PowerPoint file to another PC. And of course, I set up an account with that service provider. Everything went well. I bought a movie, nice movie. The company, the service provider, warned me in case something goes wrong, make sure that you actually make a backup of that movie, because otherwise you'll be in trouble. We don't let you download, so they carefully warned me. And in order to play it, I needed a license. I didn't see that, of course. That was done in the background, and this particular DRM system brought me in connection with the license server. The license was downloaded to my device. I could play. And of course, I also made that backup copy that I should have done. At some unfortunate point in time, this device got lost in the Atlantic, so gone. I bought a new device. I reported that device to my service provider, and the service provider said, fine, we registered that new device. It took a few calls, but the new device was registered, the old device was kicked out. I restored the content, as I was supposed to do. I carefully used my backup copy, and I started to play. So in the background, there was a connection with the license server. And guess what? He didn't play. And I did everything correctly. I talked to my service provider, and they said, well, you did what you should have done, and you paid the $10 for this movie, but unfortunately, we're not able to help you right now. We will restitute $10 to you, but you will not be able to play that movie. And any idea why that would be? It's something that as a consumer you never expect. So this was a sell-through movie. So you, as a consumer, you think you have ownership of that movie. That's not necessarily the case. What I had the right to use that movie for infinity. But the downloading aspect of it actually had no infinite duration. So there was a download window for this particular movie. And that download window had ended when I wanted to download the new license. And still this particular movie company has not opened up that window yet. So I did buy it, I played by the rules, but I couldn't use it. So even the service provider couldn't help me, because there's nothing they could do. It was on their contract not to allow the license server to issue a license. So this is a serious disconnect. This is something that as a consumer you don't expect. I even think that the service provider was a little bit surprised. But there's this disconnect, something that is very common for content owners. They do this for particular business reasons. and it's not expected by consumers. So no nice view. So what is the problem here? There was a technology component, which is there was no key available to unlock the content, and there's a policy component, which is there is no download possible during a no download window. So what causes this? Well, this is caused by digital rights management. The intention was to have a lock on content. Somehow there needed to be a lock on content to control when you download content or when you get content. It cannot simply go out on the internet and spread with all your friends, your 4.6 billion friends that you have on this world. Which is good. You need to protect your intellectual property. That's not the issue. But the point is that the keys that are held to unlock that content are held by service providers mostly of the time. And what it does for a consumer is it brings a disconnect between the content and the store where you buy the content. So the consumer is content oriented. He doesn't really care where he gets his content. If you buy a CD at Towers or Target or whatever, you really don't care where you buy the CD. It's just the CD. Once you have the CD, you forget about the retail store. That's no longer the case with DRM. It really matters why you buy the content. Of course, for a service provider, it's the other way around. They don't care so much about the content. They care more about consumer control. So they want to make control over their consumer. They want to have a very tight relationship, business relationship with the consumer. And for that, they use DRM. It enables new business models. So they have proprietary locks, so different DRM systems. Apple has a different DRM system than Microsoft. And they also hold onto the keys. So you don't get the key unless you have this business relationship. And of course, what happens to the consumer, instead of having a coupling between content and consumer, now you have a coupling between the consumer and the service provider, and then only through the content. Part of the problem is DRM interoperability, which means that the locks, the type of lock that you have, might be different from service provider to service provider. But that's not the only case. Even if you would have the same DRM, the service providers could still decide to hold onto their keys and not share those keys with other service providers. So it's more a business issue than actually a technology issue. So when we talk non-interoperability, there's the technical stuff, but it's only a minor part. It's the business stuff that really counts. So what does it do if you have this non-interoperability? There's all kinds of frustrations, and Brian already mentioned a few of those frustrations. There's consumer frustration. There's a disconnect between what the consumer expects and what the service providers and the content owners expect. So the consumer simply doesn't understand the technology, has no idea about DRM, probably doesn't even know about region coding, and he doesn't understand about the policies. He has no idea about download windows. There's also a content owner frustration with DRM. It's not necessarily that they're happy with this, and Brian already alluded to this. You could get a lock-in with a service provider, and there is some famous example, Apple, where essentially music is being locked into one single service provider. And there's also service provider frustration. And the little story that I had to make several calls to my service provider. That costs money, so that's not something that they're looking forward to. They want things to work smoothly. From my perspective, as a member of Hewlett-Packard, we also are not too happy with this. So although it might enable all kinds of new business models when you use DRM, there's also a lot of stuff that is, in our perspective, not optimal. We have consumer frustration, which we suffer also from, but we have to pay money. For example, when we implement a DRM system, it's not for free. OMA, Open Mobile Alliance DRM, you want to implement it in a device, it's a pretty costly affair. There's all issues with incompatibility, which we talked about. There's issues with fragility. Things easily break. Have you ever tried to use a download manager for one of the DRM systems that are around? My bet is that more often than not, you have experienced somehow that the system broke down during the download. At least I have. And there's all kind of fragmentation. Which DRM to put on which device? How do you make the choice? And how do we actually recover the costs when doing so? So what we, as an industrial partner, would like to see as a wish list is that We want reasonably priced DRM tools with fair policies such that consumers have more or less the same expectations as the content owners and the service providers. And we want things to be transparent. By the way, there's a typo here, so it's the last A in transparent should be an E, I know. So we want things to be interoperable. If we move content in our house, it should simply play. Personally, as a consumer, I like to see region coding go away because my region is the world, and I think for many people these days, more and more the region is the world. So things that we expect and that move content from one place to another place should simply work. And we should have the appropriate tools and policies to do so. So DRM is essentially a tool. You can build bad stuff with it, or you can build really nice stuff with it. I hope that we're going to build the nice stuff. So positive science, sorry Jim, people are working on this, and again, this has been alluded to by a number of people already, and I will mention too, Coral, of which I have been a part, but also DNLA, Digital Living Network Alliance, is now working on interoperability within the home, and this is done as a call by the copy protections subgroup right now. And thank you.
Thank you, Tom. You know, I love interoperability. My only example of interoperability I can think of is when I went to Eindhoven in the Netherlands, and I was told the hotel was just, don't take a cab, it's a short walk, which it was, but I was insecure, and I saw this DLH guy unloading a package, and I went over to him and I said, do you speak English? And the guy just looks at me and goes, of course. And I think Netherlands is very interoperable if you speak English. Our next speaker is Larry Roth. He's Vice President of Marketing and Business Development, and in such he oversees Cinea's licensing and partnering activities, targeting system operators, vendors, and the Hollywood studios. He was a co-founder of Cinea and joined Dolby Labs following the acquisition of Cinea by Dolby in 2003. And Larry's worked in the digital convergence marketplace for 8 years. I'm sorry I don't have my slides. I had this wonderful slide of digital convergence, which is a big automobile accident, and served as an executive within the film industry for 10 years prior to that. And the list of companies he worked at, he's like me. I've been to a lot of different places, peripatetic, I think you call it. But
part of Convergence, right?
Part of Convergence, right. AOL, Time Warner, MGM, United Artists, Turner Broadcasting. And he's a founding member of the advisory board for the Center of Intellectual Property at the University of Maryland, and is also advisor to the New Leaders for New Schools, an educational nonprofit organization. Larry earned his MBA from the Anderson School at UCLA and his bachelor's degree in Science, Technology, and Society from Vassar College. Larry.
Thank you.
Oops.
Well, being the only sales and marketing executive on this panel, I was scared to death when I heard their resumes. In fact, Jeff kind of wrote the book on watermarking, and I'm going to talk about watermarking today. I figured since it's titled DRM 101, as long as it's not a higher level course, I'm okay.
It's not 101, first level.
Yeah, okay, very good. So I'm going to talk about forensic watermarking, also known as media serialization. This is a technology that many think is an essential complement to DRM. In some cases, it might even be a replacement for DRM. And it speaks to a lot of these questions of interoperability and lock-in and so on. Since Jeff gave a nice review of digital watermarking, I won't go into it. Forensic watermarking is a part of a class of technologies called digital watermarking, and there's broadcast monitoring, content identification, copy control. I'll focus on forensics. So, a few different names, as I said, media serialization, session-based watermarking. What we're really talking about is placing an imperceptible mark in a video stream or perhaps an audio stream, such that if you find a copy of that content out on the web, or it's the source for millions of stolen DVDs or pirated DVDs that are being sold throughout Indonesia, you can take that content, you can extract the mark, and you can trace it back to Jim's account or somebody else's account. So what we're talking about is a forensic tool, and a tool for tracing back to the original source of the content. Generally, it'll link to a specific system, like this came from Comcast, or this came from a specific set-top box or specific device, maybe even a specific transaction where you have an account relationship with a download company. Again, it's embedded in the video. It's a key characteristic is that it's highly robust, so that the hackers can't pull it out. Imperceptible, so there's no impact on viewing experience, recoverable later on, and as I said, highly robust. And again, a lot of people talk about this being an essential complement to digital rights management, and I'll explain why. Well, first of all, there's a problem of the analog whole. We are, at the end of the day, analog beings. This is how we capture the content or receive the content. At some point, the content has to leave the digital rights management, the lock-in phase, and be displayed. So whether you're ripping off an analog port or you're camcordering off a screen, at some point you're outside the security envelope. So by putting a watermark in there, you can actually extend that envelope. You can actually keep that content protected in some fashion as it plays back. So a key benefit, obviously, is to catch the real crooks. I mean, one of the things that gets lost here, there's a lot of talk about DRM and business models and how we're enabling new businesses, all well and good. But at the end of the day, piracy is a multi-billion-dollar business. I mean, there's major organized crime efforts going on around the world stealing content. And by putting a trace in these watermarks, you're giving law enforcement a key tool. The other part of the story, though, is deterrence. And this is very interesting because it's once you hear about it, I'll take a specific example. Everybody knows that screeners are used for Academy Award members and others. That's how they watch their movies so that they can vote. And when these screeners, generally on DVD, are distributed to these guilds and to the Academy, when I first got into the business, they'd show up on your doorstep, you pass to somebody else, you pass to somebody else. Inevitably, this was the piracy hole. All of this content ended up on the web. Well, after a lot of hue and cry, the studios focused on putting watermarks into the DVDs that they distributed, so that every Academy member knows that there's a name or ID number that's associated with them on that DVD. Well, piracy in that channel has dropped completely. There's still piracy, but that's when somebody intercepts the DVD. It never gets to the actual owner, so it gets to their admin or it gets to their housekeeper or something like that. And law enforcement can track it back. But the idea of actually sharing the content widely doesn't happen anymore. It's something called trusted sharing. You'll still share it with a friend, but I want that back at the end of the day because, you know, my name's on the line. I also think of this as a least invasive content protection technology. At the end of the day, you're using, these Academy members are using their discs just as they always do. They take it around with them. They watch it on their boat, in their second home, their third home. They take it upstairs. They can make a copy of it, perhaps. But at the end of the day, there's content protection on it. So it's a win-win for the consumer as well as for the content owner. Jeff, I actually stole this from a Thompson slide, so I hope it's fair use and not.
I just gave him my card.
All right, so just quickly, some of the ways that watermarks, forensic watermarks, are being used today. It's being used in post-production. It's being used with screeners, as I described. It's used with digital cinema. It's in the DCI spec, so every digital cinema projector that goes out has to be able to embed, or server that goes out has to be able to embed watermarking. So it's being used a lot in the professional domain. Packaged media is interesting because it's an option in the AACS DRM standard for Blu-ray. It's a problem because people don't know. I mean, you can put the ID of the box into a playback, into a video stream, but if you don't know who owns the box, it's kind of irrelevant. So it may get used over time. It's in as an option right now. So the big question mark is, can it be used in the electronic distribution world? And the studios came to us a couple of years ago, and came to Thomson, Phillips, to ourselves, and said, can you do what you do professionally? In the professional environment, can you put this into this extraordinarily distributed, massively used environment? And the answer's been positive. Two different applications. One, you could actually put in marks up at the head end. So in a video-on-demand environment, whether it's cable or satellite, IPTV, downloads, you could actually insert the mark at the head end as it streams out to the consumer. So the benefit here is you don't need to use it for, you don't need to get out into the field and do an install along the entire base. You don't have to worry about legacy systems. You can do it all up at the head end. At some point in time, you'll want to do it down on the set-top box or the device, because at the end of the day, if you're broadcasting, you'll want a watermark there. And the key thing there is what you want in the device is to make sure that you're watermarking such that both your analog and digital digital outputs are all watermarked. So, I keep on asking myself this as a sales and marketing guy. All right, so first question. First issue was technical viability. Can you really do this throughout in VOD environments and cable environments, satellite, and so on? It's taken about 2 years to get there, but we can do it now. And all, Phillips Thompson, ourselves, Ferromatrix, can all do this, and we have off-the-shelf solutions that can be used and deployed. So we've gotten past that issue. Privacy questions. This has actually been a really interesting problem. The first response is, well, is there a problem with putting ID numbers or stuff in there? It's going to be pushback. So we, along with the Digital Watermarking Alliance, engaged with the .orgs involved with privacy and consumer rights, and working on a set of privacy principles, which will be published in the next couple of months. The two key things: don't put personally identifiable information in there. It should be an ID number or something like that. Don't put a social security number in there. And make sure you disclose it. Just make sure people know that the mark is in there. Of course, if you're trying to deter people from stealing this stuff, it makes sense to do that anyway. I got 2 minutes, and I think I can do that. Effectiveness. It's very effective in the professional environment. It's not been proven yet in the consumer environment. Some massive trials going on to test that now. Operationally, if you're watermarking all content everywhere, going down across the globe into all sorts of devices, all sorts of different ways of distributing, how do you handle that? How do you handle the recoveries? How do you capture that information? How do you act on information if you find a pirate or so on? These are all questions that the industry is trying to grapple with, and we're engaged with a couple of the studios now to try to understand that and flesh that out. And finally, I think the biggest problem is a deployment strategy. Okay, it works, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the system operator like Comcast that's going to have to implement this at the requirement of the studios. The studios are loath to get into, well, who's paying what and so on, so there's this back and forth battle. One of the arguments is, well, if it's already on DVD and DVDs can get ripped, I don't want to put it out for content, long-tail content and so on. I don't want to have to spend the money to watermark that kind of content. So what the industry is focusing on is early window content, the new windows and new products that have come out in a kind of a home theatrical environment, high def and so on. That's where this is talking about introducing watermarking. Once you put the watermarking capability in there, you can watermark everything. But what's going to be the driver for it, the business driver for it? It's going to be this early window and premium content. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you,
Thank
Larry.
you.
Now that I've been such a slave driver and made sure there was time for you, which is rare, I usually am not that good, you better have questions. Oh, so now I've intimidated everybody. I'll talk for a little bit if I can't get coming. Someone must have a question in this panel. Well, you all now know about your... I knew you would.
I'll ask one. There's references made to content protection related to Blu-ray and high-definition content coming out. I'm curious there in terms of the levels of content protection being applied with ACS and BD+, where the content protection will be applied, and to what extent watermarking is part of that system for either copy control or forensics and BD+, et cetera. And that's a question for the panel.
Who wants to answer that one? Fortunately, I can say I don't know anything about that.
I mean, I can speak to it somewhat, without revealing, I guess, too much about the technical nature of things that are, in the case of AACS, not quite complete. But obviously, AACS is being used currently on all high-def physical formats. It's been publicly announced that watermark is contemplated as something that will be incorporated to all AACS encrypted content. BD Plus is an option available to what at this point are all companies who are publishing. It is fairly public knowledge that Fox has titles out with BD Plus that are BD Plus protected. As for what other studios may follow suit, including my own, I will just say that it is an option that is available to us all.
Any other comments on?
from the rest of the panel? It's not.
I think one thing that we ought to make clear on watermarks, there was a time when watermarks were also going to be a component of CSS. You remember that?
Barely, John.
Did not go that well. The agreement wasn't amended, but the kind of watermark that you see here is basically what we consider a forensic watermark. You can trace ownership, you can trace ultimately the evildoer. The reason I said in my remarks that watermark may move more towards DRM than it is because originally what the studios had in mind was a different kind of watermark. It was what the gentleman referred to as a copy control watermark, where if you can compel devices, recording devices that make copies, to look for the watermark, and if you can compel those devices upon detecting the watermark to behave in a certain fashion, depending upon information included in the watermark, then it becomes not a matter of tracing ownership or wrongdoing, but actually controlling the behavior of the devices. So we used to talk about a watermark hierarchy, which was this state of the watermark would mean copy never. This state would mean copy once. This state would mean copy never. And there were a lot of negotiations about what kind of content could have what kind of states, and those pretty much parallel provisions in the DMCA. But much of the attention, I think, today has focused more on the forensic side. But my theory, as worthwhile as any other theory I've had, which I've given away for nothing, is that I'm not sure it's going to stay that way. I'm not sure we're not going to see a return to states of watermarks and using watermarks as a behavioral control rather than really a forensic.
There's a lot of technical difficulties, though, in using a watermark in a PC for copy control or playback control. We spent, I can't tell you how many engineering and a lot more lawyer hours because we needed the work, but debating and discussing watermarking for playback control. I think forensics is a different issue, completely different, and particularly when you're dealing with a criminal element, to trace back where these thousands of disks started out so you can hopefully shut them off, to me makes a tremendous amount of sense. But playback in a PC's got a lot of difficulties. I don't want to take up the rest of the time because I did see some questions out there.
Can I add
Sure.
just a couple of things? First of all, when you talk about watermarking for copy control, there happens to be a real technical challenge there, and that is that there's a big incentive to remove that watermark, and all of these people who are trying to remove it have a detector built into their device. And technically, that makes it a very, very difficult challenge to create a mark that can't be removed. Forensics is very different.
Yeah.
There's less incentive to remove it, and the people who are trying to remove it don't have any tools to help them.
Right.
So that's one thing. The second thing is, in terms of forensics, we used to talk about forensics as trying to catch the bad guy, putting the guy's name in there, his serial number, a transaction ID, something. But forensics is much more than that, and that's one of the things I was trying to say before. It's about trying to understand how we have a system that's supposed to keep stuff locked up. Stuff's getting out. How's it getting out? Not necessarily who did it. Of course that's important, maybe. But maybe more important, boy, it'd be interesting to find out all the pirates are using this particular model of DVD player, which isn't even made anymore, and they're selling it like hotcakes on eBay. What is it about that device that they're exploiting? And trying to gather forensics information about the problem. How is it happening? What channels are being used?
There's a couple questions. Yes?
For context purposes, for me, because I'm having trouble following you, because you're at the operational level, how do you gentlemen view the current state of copyright protection in the music industry today?
What do you mean, copyright or copy protection? Copyright, the law.
Protection.
Well, I think John and Brian are probably in the better
Is
place.
it a mess, or is it evolving towards something good, or is it awful? What's the state of it?
I think, sorry, it's like the notion of consumer expectations. Unfortunately, what consumers expect today, broadly, is to get, if they can get it for free, to get it for free. The legal situation in the music industry is very difficult, obviously. But the music industry does have legal tools beyond DRM. They're going to continue to deploy them. They're going to be unsolvable problems, obviously. You can't sue everybody. You shouldn't sue everybody. So in that sense, I guess it's messy. It's just so easy to copy. But I don't think the legal structure is meaningless. I think it's still meaningful, certainly against organized piracy. And you know, there is some suspicion that the RIAA campaign against peer-to-peer has had some success. But I think the real measurement is going to be after DRM disappears, give that a while and see whether consumer so-called expectations are now dealt with in a different way.
There's a different answer to that question, too, which is that some would argue that the current system of copyright for music, you know, it's a divided copyright. There's the publisher's right and there's a performance. That system of divided rights, and it flows over into other areas, too, really creates problems in having a business model that will deal with this issue that John talks about. People want things for free. That there were some who argued, and I think Bertelsmann tried to implement it and got itself badly sued. There are some business models that, you know, could rely on the peer-to-peer to possibly make lots of money. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff floating out there that it makes it difficult, I think, as John said, to predict and to analyze the copyright issues on music, because I think at heart it's a business model problem in the music business. Video is completely different. I'd agree with Brian on that. Not that we always agree on solutions, but it's a different industry where I think copyright is pretty good for it. And Brian, you could disagree, but there are some issues at the margins of that as well.
Yeah, but I mean, movies. I'm sorry.
Now, I want to take the young lady in back, then my friend.
If someone makes a copy of their content and gives it to you, nobody knows about it. So if your copy has some forensic information in it, nobody knows about it. It's when you take that and release it more publicly by pressing DVDs and selling them on the street or putting it on the internet, that's when someone would get a hold of it and then recover that forensic information and track it back.
That's a good question.
And that goes to the question of privacy a little bit.
Would skip her, right?
Yeah, it would skip.
Yeah,
it would skip
right.
you, right?
Just very, maybe a quick question, maybe long answer, maybe not, but just in the face of the kind of business interest that you're talking about, and being advantaged by having a control over a closed distribution system or a vertical distribution system, you know, what real likelihood is there of comprehensive interoperability? Not sort of least we can do interoperability, but interoperability of the kind that might survive a succession of devices, you know, migration of media across delivery environments, devices, time zones, et cetera, where his stuff breaks. And there's a wide variety of different media that we expect to be able to manage in tandem with, say, communications functions that are getting more and more seamless and more interoperable. You know, behavioral targeting is hoping to monetize consumer attention across environments, which would seem to advantage interoperability. But if you've got the best show in town, why should you open it up to anybody else? I mean, isn't this just going to be an ongoing process?
Good.
Why is that?
Good question. Brian, what do you want to handle it first, and if Tom wants to chime in?
I will just say, you know, I alluded to at the very end of my conversation. We've got we did convene a group at the end of last year that is trying to deal with those very issues, and that group continues to meet. And as I've indicated, it does involve a lot of the key players, and you know, really does try to address those issues in terms of succession of devices. I mean, device turnover is 2 years max at this point, on portable devices, and really starts to deal with the fact that you're changing out your computer, you're changing out your devices, your cell phones and whatnot, and not only will your devices evolve, but the content in a digital space needs to evolve with it, and those issues are very much at the forefront, and we are actively involved in discussions, a large group of us. If you're the king of the hill, maybe you don't want to engage in any discussions, but hopefully, kind of the needs of consumers and the desires of consumers, eventually carry the day, those problems are dealt with in an effective and dynamic fashion. So.
And I'm privy to some of the technical discussions going on there, and I'm pretty, well, I don't know about the legal stuff. These people talk all the time. I have no clue what they're doing. But
Oh, like we understand you.
But from a technical perspective, I think we have a pretty good system in place right now. So when the lawyers get that thing settled and give us the green light, we can actually bring this stuff to the market.
I think part of your 2 years, though, Coral was a very exciting effort, and part of the 2 years was arguably they tried to do too much, and Coral cut back at the end and focused on an interoperability technical framework rather than reams of licensing documents, and the interoperability framework is probably workable. So things aren't, part of the time when I see these discussions or hear these discussions or see slides like Tom's that show all these problems, I mean, these are difficult problems. They're difficult legally, they're difficult technically. Customers' expectations or the great promise of the digital age is not going to happen overnight. There's going to be problems, and there's going to be sidetracks, and people are going to make mistakes. But that's, it's no reason to run roughshod over everything and just throw up your hands and say, let's just get rid of DRM, get rid of copyright.
No, I understood. I just see an impasse between the business.
One more question.
It's been a theme that's come forward, which is that business interests countervene the potential of interoperable technologies, and that's happened repeatedly. So I'm just curious as to people's forecasts as to whether that's going to be a lessening or an increasing effect.
Well, as Brian said, king of the hill is a different issue, but there's lots of people who are not king of the hill, and they have a serious interest in making interoperability work.
Yeah.
Tendency to storm the castle.
Well,
Yeah, but the king of the hill blamed it on the record industry, right?
okay, I think we only have time for one more question. Yes?
Yeah, I just want to go back and find out the forensic watermarking technology is practical for somebody who, say, is an independent filmmaker and wants to, say, put video on the internet, and they have a modest production facility. And secondly, when you talk about forensic watermarking, you have to have some sort of certificate authority that's going to confirm the identity. Can you talk a little about which exists, so that you could say, you give them the watermark and they can corroborate it, particularly as the Copyright Office up to date, so you can submit a copy of the work, including the watermark, and that serves as proof of the watermark.
I would say there are, it is certainly viable for independent companies to do it. I think it's as much the recovery and aspect of things. Where do you find it? Like, the studios have this massive operation looking for pirated content, right? And that feeds back through the MPA, feeds back in. And you can, is that massive? Is that, for independents, I'm not sure, you can put the mark in there. It's how you find the content that you want to check is yours and so on. So I think it's the recovery side of things that's problematic for independents.
That's why I asked about the authority in the Copyright Office registration.
They're not involved.
Forensic watermark is typically not used to prove authorship. That's it's another application of watermarking that we don't call forensic watermarking, where you put in your own ID to identify your.
It's a legal issue, so Mr. Bob can answer it. It's a legal issue. How do you prove that the authorship using forensic watermark?
I imagine. Well, first, I think it is a technical issue to use the watermark to produce authorship. A proof of authorship is ultimately going to depend on people on facts and people asserting that they created this and didn't copy it from somebody else. I don't think, watermarks may provide prima facie or factual evidence that because my name is embedded in the picture, I created it or I owned it, but that's not going to be irrebuttable. I don't think the Copyright Office will have anything to do with it at
No,
all.
and I think so. It's almost technically impossible. There's many academic publications showing that whatever you want to do, there's always circumvention for proving ownership or authorship with digital watermarking. But if you talk forensic applications, it's not your purpose to prove ownership. It's trying to understand what the chain of events is that actually created this illegal copy. You can always find out who is the author because you simply look at the movie, and if it's War of the Worlds, you know who made the movie. So you really, that's not what you're trying to do.
Well, in the case where the woman asked, if someone produces the work, and they send it to a colleague of them who receives them and presents it as their work.
Yeah, but
That's a matter of proof in court at the end of the day, and it's a whole bunch of facts. The fact that watermark's there with somebody's name in it is at least some piece of evidence. But as John says, it's not the end. It's a fundamentally legal fact-based issue. Who owns something, whether it's a movie or it's a piece of land.
And that's not what we're doing with forensic watermarking. We'll use other type of information other than say ownership or device ID necessarily to find. We're trying to trace back where did things happen, when did it start, how did it evolve, and ownership is only a very minor part of that, which probably we won't even trust.
Yeah, I think you can come up. We're running out. Unfortunately, we're getting the signal. We've ran out of time, and I'm sure some people will stick around if you have more individual questions. But I want to thank our panel for really excellent presentation.